Today we are diving into Dr. Eric Berg's perspective on cancer prevention. And before we get into his 30 tips, we really need to get our heads around the core theory that ties them all together. It's a totally different way of looking at what cancer actually is. And just as a heads up, this explainer is breaking down Dr. Berg's specific viewpoint on this topic. Okay, so let's start right there with these two competing ideas. The conventional view, the one you've probably heard a million times, says cancer all starts with a random genetic mutation. But the metabolic view, which is the whole foundation for Dr. Berg's approach, says, hold on, the real problem starts way earlier. It starts with damage to the tiny energy factories inside our cells, the mitochondria. So here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off by comparing those two theories. Then we're going to explore that all-important mitochondria connection. And from there, we'll get into the practical stuff. Dr. Berg's actionable tips, which we've grouped into 3 key areas: strengthening your cellular defenses, fueling your body the right way, and cutting down on your exposure to harmful things. So why even question the conventional model? Well, Dr. Berg points to a pretty sobering fact. After decades of research and literally trillions of dollars spent, the 5-year survival rates for a lot of cancers have basically flatlined. And for him, that's a huge red flag that suggests we might be focusing on a symptom of the disease, not the actual root cause. Okay, before we go any further, let's properly introduce our main character in this story, the mitochondria. You can just think of these as the tiny power plants inside every single one of our cells. Their main job is to take the food we eat and convert it into energy. But, and this is key, they need one crucial ingredient to do this job efficiently: oxygen. You're going to want to remember that because it is absolutely central to this entire theory. So how does this all connect? You know, this next part, this is really the heart of the metabolic theory. The idea isn't that cells just randomly go haywire and become cancerous. It's that they are forced to adapt, to find a new way to survive when their main power system, the mitochondria, breaks down. And this is a perfect way to picture what's happening. See, in a healthy cell, the mitochondria are humming along, using oxygen super efficiently. But then, when they get damaged, by toxins or radiation or just chronic inflammation, they can't use oxygen anymore. And the cell, in a desperate move to stay alive, switches over to this primitive backup plan called fermentation. It's an energy process that doesn't need any oxygen at all. Now, this switch, it has a massive consequence. Fermentation is incredibly inefficient. So to get the same amount of energy, a cell needs to just gobble up a huge amount of glucose, or sugar. This is where Dr. Berg's analogy comes in. These adapted cells are basically like vacuum cleaners for sugar, just constantly sucking it up to survive. And you know what's wild? This isn't just some abstract theory. It's directly connected to how we diagnose cancer today. A PET scan works by injecting a type of radioactive sugar into the body. And the areas that light up like a Christmas tree, those are the spots that are consuming the most sugar. According to this model, you're literally seeing a picture of cells that have flipped the switch to fermentation. Okay, so that's the theory. Now, what do we do about it? This brings us to the actionable tips. If the problem starts with damaged mitochondria, then the solution has to involve protecting them. This first batch of tips is all about building a more resilient body, creating an internal environment that is just plain hostile to cancer. All right, first up on the list, vitamin D. Dr. Berg basically calls it the master regulator of our immune system. It's absolutely essential for your immune cells, like your natural killer cells, to work properly. The very cells whose job it is to hunt down and destroy cancer cells. And he suggests a specific target, aiming for a minimum blood level of 60 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. And it doesn't stop there. Here are a few more really powerful strategies. Cold therapy, like even just a cold shower, is a type of stress that forces your body to actually make more mitochondria and stronger ones to generate heat. Fasting, on the other hand, kicks on this cellular cleanup process called autophagy, where your body literally recycles old, damaged mitochondria. Then you have compounds from things like mushrooms and colostrum, which are suggested to directly fire up those critical immune cells. We can also give our bodies some direct support with very specific micronutrients. Selenium, for instance, helps build powerful antioxidants. Magnesium is just non-negotiable for producing energy. And NAD, which you get from vitamin B3, is crucial for the actual chemical reactions that create that energy inside the mitochondria. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the fuel we put in our bodies. I mean, if damaged cells are basically sugar vacuums, then what we eat plays a massive role, right? This section is all about starving the problem and feeding the solution.
And this is it. This is the single most important dietary point, according to this theory. Since these rogue cells thrive on glucose, the most direct strategy is to just take away their favorite food. And that means getting rid of refined sugars and starches that send your blood sugar through the roof.
So to make that happen, Dr. Berg recommends a healthy ketogenic diet. This naturally lowers sugar and allows your mitochondria to run on a much cleaner fuel source called ketones. He also advises cutting out snacking to keep insulin low, upping your omega-3s to fight inflammation, and getting plenty of sulforaphane from things like broccoli sprouts to help your body's natural detoxification pathways. Oh, and here's a quick but really important note on iron. The source material claims that cancer cells actually use iron to proliferate, to multiply faster. Because of this, it advises being careful with iron supplements and even with cooking on things like cast iron skillets, because our bodies have a tough time getting rid of any excess. Okay, so we've worked on strengthening our internal defenses, and we've cleaned up our fuel source. The final piece of this puzzle, according to this model, is to cut down our exposure to the stuff from the outside world that can cause that initial mitochondrial damage in the first place. And 3 big exposures are highlighted. First, ionizing radiation from sources like frequent X-rays or CAT scans. Second, electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, which the source claims can cause a buildup of calcium that actually destroys mitochondria. And third, all the potential contaminants in our water supply, which makes a good filter for drinking and even showering a really worthwhile investment. Now for the flip side of that coin. If a lack of using oxygen is the problem, then a huge strategy is to literally flood your body with oxygen. You can do this through simple exercise, of course, but there are also specialized therapies like hyperbaric oxygen and even something called intermittent hypoxia training, which, believe it or not, makes your body way more efficient at using oxygen over time. And I love this one. It's such a beautifully simple tip. It's the practice of forest breathing. The source notes that pine trees in particular release these compounds into the air that have actually been shown to increase the activity of those cancer-fighting immune cells we talked about earlier. Pretty cool, right? Look, when you boil all 30 of these tips down, they all point to one central idea. The goal isn't just to attack bad cells. It's to create an internal environment where they simply can't survive in the first place. An environment that is well defended, properly fueled, and rich in oxygen. The whole focus shifts to proactively promoting health, specifically the health of your mitochondria. And that really leaves us with a big question to chew on. If we were to shift our primary focus in preventative health away from just avoiding genetic mutations and towards actively supporting our cellular energy systems, what would change? How might that reshape the daily choices we all make about our diet, our exercise, and even our environment?